Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé. Let's watch.
24 hours since I've been in Peru, and I still have not seen Mahogany yet. I am holding out hope that tonight's the night. Because I've decided to go to San Bartolo, which is where she lives with her parents. Fortunately or unfortunately, I am in love with this woman.
No, you don't just show up unannounced. One, if you're being catfished, do you really think she's from there? Two, are you going to be able to find her? I don't know. Anyway, how do I think about it? No, you don't show up unannounced. You need permission, especially under these circumstances. I mean, now, on the other hand, maybe it'll end up working for the wrong reasons. On the same other hand, if you're being catfished, is it okay to, because we haven't seen all the texts, but from what we did see and from what his account is, which I don't doubt, it's just been a lot of I'm in love with you, you're my number one, we're and over a long period of time. So in his mind, he's like, well, I'm just going to my girlfriend's house. Like, what's the problem? But then anyone on the outside would say, that there's a good chance this person doesn't exist. So I don't think that justifies essentially stalking someone and scaring them, right? Plus, do they want to be on camera? Like, I don't know.
And that means I need to explore what's happening. Well, still no text from her. So, I don't even know if she's getting these.
All right. But I don't know, and I'm guessing we'll find out what happens, but it's that fantasy, right? I need her to love me. I need her to be real. I need the words to be true. So we're as good as married at this point. We're soulmates. We're in love. Like, in his mind, they've been married or they've been engaged for 3 years with an in-person relationship, and she's not returning the texts. And she isn't saying, I hate you, stay away from me. She's saying, my dad is getting in our way. And so under his fantasy version, I think, of the relationship, it wouldn't be unusual to say, look, I'm just going to go to the dad, or I'm just going to go to her house and just check in on her. Like, there's a circumstance where that would, I guess, make sense, but his fantasy is, I think, consistently driving him to do behaviors that, from us on the outside and everyone around him, are like, what are you doing?
I'm actually not ready for her to answer the phone. I don't even know what I'd say.
And like I've been saying, let's say that she is real. If she is real, what a massive jerk face that you're dating, Ben. That she, at the very last minute, says, well, my dad's a little against our relationship, so don't come down. Which, someone would be entitled to. You go down there. Like, just imagine you're truly in love with someone. And like, you're Mahogany. You're truly in love. You're just like, oh, this is my soul, this is my soul. And then your dad's like, well, I don't know about his intentions. You'd be like, well, I do. And I'm a grown woman, so, let's have a conversation. But anyway, and then you're like, well, Ben, maybe you shouldn't come down. And then he comes down. Well, at the very least, you would text him and call him. And at best, you'd show up at the airport, or at least see him and be like, I'm so glad you came, but you got to go back home. Like, if you're truly in love with someone. So even if his fantasy is true, why aren't you paying attention to that part of it? But when you need something to be true, then you'll ignore any facts otherwise.
It's like, where were you? Or just, I love you? Like, I want to give Mahogany the benefit of the doubt. I think the reality of this whole thing is hitting her, and I think she's scared.
Right. And this is actually similar, if not the same, as conspiracy theories, that people will believe anything, that Hillary Clinton is a lizard person and Tom Hanks is drinking the blood of children. I mean, literally, there's a sizable percentage of Americans and people around the world who believe that literally. It's not just a joke or metaphor. They literally believe that. A lot of people do. And how could you believe something so absurd? Well, because when you need something to be true, any evidence otherwise, you make up a story about that. And so there's so much evidence he's being catfished, or at best being completely mistreated. I mean, she's not even texting about. So you develop a story. Oh, she must be really afraid. or her dad must have taken her phone away, or, there's always an excuse. You approach people who believe in the lizard people. How come we don't have any evidence of it? Well, it's because the Illuminati has brainwashed all the doctors or whatever. There's always a story.
Yeah, I'm getting nothing. For right now, I think I'm just going to say I'm headed your way. Give her a heads up. I know that the love that we shared is real, and I want to pursue it.
Just classic undifferentiation. It feels real to him, therefore it is real. She feels real to me, therefore she is real. No. If that's the only text he's got after 24 hours of, I'm in Lima, where are you? I love you, where are you? And the long train metaphor, parable thing. I'm coming out there. The only thing you get is, Lima is very far away from San Bartolo. I think that's the name of the town where she lives, where she purportedly lives. Just imagine that. You're Ben, you're like, yeah, well, I mean, Lima's a long way from the United States. So if we assume that this is gaslighting, or not gaslighting, catfishing, someone on the other end is like, I'm starting to feel a little bad about this. And if he comes out and discovers that I'm not real, then I can't scam him anymore. So what do I say? How do I get him to turn back and go home so I can continue to, play him from afar?
When I saw the text, I thought, here we go. The explanation I've been waiting for, the apology. And all it says is San Bartolo is very distant from Lima. I don't know what she meant by that.
I mean, it's clear to me what the message is, which is don't make that trip. It's too far. It's a nice way of saying don't come, I think, right? Now, something I haven't talked about is the psychology of catfishers, right? That why would you do it? Well, like I said, there's been different kinds. You have the summit kind, which I believe was, I want to interact with people online and I don't have the self-esteem about my photogenic nature, so I'll steal a photo from someone else. The other thing is, what about the person you're stealing the identity of? I mean, that's pretty awful. To, like, my wife, I've talked about this before on the podcast, that she's a professional model, and someone stole her picture and her name and made a profile claiming to be her on Twitter or something. And in my period, and if you're a therapist, you should do this. You should periodically Google yourself, just because your clients are going to Google you. You need to, make sure that your clients aren't seeing things that you don't want them to see, and for treatment reasons. And I came across someone that had her profile, and it's a violation. Someone walking around with your picture and your name, especially on, it's one thing to have a license. I had someone do that to me once, because that's like cashing a check or something, and that feels bad. But it's something just like, what destruction has this person done online under my name? Who out there thinks that I was the one responsible for that when I wasn't responsible for that? So it has to, anyway. So the psychology of a catfisher, the summit kind are insecure and looking for human contact, and are resorting to immoral behavior because they believe they can't just be themselves. The Williams profile is seemingly a business decision of, it's the Nigerian prince who needs money email scam from the 90s. Or convincing your parents that they have a virus and they need to hand over their credit card numbers in order to get the virus off of their computer, which happened to my mom, by the way. And incidentally, when my mom calls me and she's like, so I got this weird message on my computer and it said to call this number, and she describes it to me, and I said, oh, Mom, thank God you told me, because never call those numbers. Like, I'm so glad, great you called me, because I'm always asking my mom, like, when you have a problem with your computer, call me. Like, I can help. I'm like, oh, thank God you called me. And she's like, well, I'm like, what? She's, oh, I called the number. I'm like, okay, well, you didn't give him your credit card information. Well, and I'm like, and, you know, so what's the psychology behind that? Because that's psychopathic. You know, that'd be like walking up to someone and just pushing them over and taking their purse. But when I've seen exposés on these individuals, sometimes they are just trying to find a job and they can't earn any money. And there's essentially a mob boss character that employs innocent-ish people who are desperate for a job. And you could really blame the person in charge of the organization, because the person in charge is rarely the one making those calls, and the people making the calls are following a script. You could argue that the individuals have a choice and could walk away. I think another element of that psychology is that you are from a poor community and you see, particularly Americans, and I've heard people talk this way, as just completely extravagantly rich. Even the average American, compared to them, and especially in their eyes, is just wasting money. And if you siphon off $1,000 that will set you up for a year of comfort, and they can have that money returned to them by the bank because of insurance or something, then so be it. You know, it's nothing to them. It's barely anything to them, and it would mean so much to us, and it's unfair. And the Americans have been colonizing us, or, you know, Western countries have been colonizing us, and so part of our poverty is their fault. You know, you get in this mindset that it's justified and it's okay. And I suppose we could have a debate about that if I heard the particulars of that argument. So I think that's another aspect to it. And obviously, if you're desperate and you can't, I mean, there are people, when I travel, I like to get to know the people of that area as best I can. It's a part of why I travel, I guess. You know, if I'm in an Uber, like I was in Colombia, in Bogota, and it was just me. And I really got to know this one driver really well. And he told me that he used to live in Venezuela with his family, and they were all middle-class professionals, doctors, lawyers. And then they had to flee because of the government and the economic problems in Venezuela, and they fled to Colombia. They'd love to go to the States, but they're like, that's never going to happen. So we're just going to have to make do in Bogota. And they're all Uber drivers, you know. And I believe even in Bogota, being an Uber driver is illegal or against regulation. So you have to be careful. Like, I remember people telling me, when you're in Bogota taking an Uber, I don't know if this is still the case, you want to sit in the front seat, because if you sit in the back seat, it signals to the authorities that it's an Uber, so you have to sit in the front. Anyway, so it just sounded like a really unfortunate thing, and it gave me a perspective on what at least that, you know, individual was going through in his family. And another thing that I've heard from people in other countries when I talk to them is that they, you know, the amount of money that they're making makes it so that they can't afford simple is a funny word, like things that we take for granted in the States as just given medical procedures. Like, if you're, like this one woman was telling me about how her mom had cancer, breast cancer, and if they were in the States or anywhere else, or in a lot of other places in the world, this was in Cuba. And she was telling me that if she had enough money, and she wasn't trying to scam me. She wasn't, you know, I had to gain her trust. I wasn't trying to, but, you know, in the conversation, eventually she tells me, she was telling all of us that her family couldn't afford treatment for her mom, and her mom was going to die of a very treatable cancer because of the economics in Cuba. And I talked to a lot of people on those lines. Like, a lot of people were just like, the government sets your wage and it's very low and it's really hard to make ends meet. And, you know, I heard that a lot. And anyway, my point is that if you're in that state, if you're in that situation and you've you've overturned a lot of rocks to pull yourself out of poverty, to literally save your mother's life. And someone says, I heard about this thing where you call these people and you might actually be able to get like a couple $100 out of them. You might consider it. So I think that's another element to the possibility of the catfishers. Another psychology, catfisher-wise, profile-wise, is pranksters, people that just are looking to have fun. There's a I don't know if they're always psychopaths, but there's a certain group of people who, when they go online, they just like to mess with people. And I can kind of relate to, not to catfishing, but me and Umberto, we play StarCraft sometimes online together. And the first screen you see when you load StarCraft, it's a video game. There's a forum, a chat that's like constantly scrolling, and everyone who's playing the game can just chat with everyone else that's playing the game in this general chat room. And the chat is always just like really toxic. And I don't know who these individuals are, but half the time it's just vile things that they're saying to each other. And it's just so dumb that I, at times, feel compelled to mess with them. Like, there'll be some political thing, like, screw Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she can rot in hell. And I'll just be like, I like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I like what she stands for. I think she's a very respectable woman. And then all the comments, and I know that I'm not convincing anyone, and it just gives me some pleasure to kind of just state the obvious and have them attack me. I'm trolling it, but it's not a troll in my book. I feel like I'm just being, I feel like I'm contrasting their tone in a way that shows like, you don't have to bully everyone on the internet to have self-esteem. You can just like things. It's so, because on the internet, in certain corners of the internet, it's like you have to hate everything. I see sometimes the audience of this show and even of my channel having this kind of attitude. Not always, but this attitude of just like, look, I hate this person, but I can relate to him sometimes. And I'm like, when I first saw that, I thought, oh, but then I started seeing it so often. I'm like, why do you have to caveat everything about every cast member on the show as, by the way, I hate them. We can all agree that they're a deplorable. I mean, people that aren't deplorable, like Tanya, Tanya and Sinjin, for example. It's like, Tanya's not a deplorable. She's struggling and she's said some questionable things, but she's not a terrible human being. Did she lie ever? I don't think she's ever lied or cheated or stolen or abused or anything. She can be critical, but she's not a horrible person. And people would say like, they're about to say something nice about Tanya, and they'll say, I hate Tanya. I just want to be clear, as a way of like heading it off at the best. But, I kind of have some empathy in this one. It's like, why can't you just have empathy? Like, why can't you just be in? I'm going on long. But I just want to say this last thing is that when I first started posting these videos, I've been doing podcasting for almost 14 years. And so I've always had a particular vibe, a particular mindset. But when I started posting these videos, a lot of people called me like Mr. Rogers. Oh my God, he's so wholesome. And then when I would swear or something, people were like, oh my God, he's swearing. And I'm like, people have this vision of me like I'm literally a Mr. Rogers character. And although that's extremely flattering, and I can't think of a better role model to emulate, but I don't really see myself that way. And I don't promote myself that way. But because I'm not being mean, because I'm liking people and having compassion, somehow I'm this hugely different thing. Now, I'm not unique, but I was unique enough. I was different enough from the common discourse that people were seeing me as this extremely wholesome, like, wonderful human being. And although, it's nice, but I was like, huh? Like, why is liking someone or having compassion for someone such an anomaly? And I think it's because our default setting when we're insecure is to hate things. It's easier to hate. It's easier to put things down. It's less vulnerable. Anyway, so that's another profile, is someone who is just trying to mess with someone and they think it's hilarious. And they're just like, look what I'm going to do. I'm going to mess with us. So I think that's another profile. There's probably other profiles of catfishers anyway.
But at the same time, I'm glad she actually responded, because she wasn't telling me to go away. She wasn't telling me to stay home. She wasn't telling me to turn around and get on a plane to leave. So I take that as a good sign.
Okay, so it doesn't get any better than that in terms of demonstrating my point. In the absence of information, he will fill in what he wants to see. I mean, that is just so she's not saying come, she's not saying don't come. So he's saying, and let's rewind that because it doesn't get any more demonstrative than this.
It's very distant from Lima. I don't know what she meant by that. But at the same time, I'm glad she actually responded, because she wasn't telling me to go away. She wasn't telling me to stay home. She wasn't telling me to turn around and get on a plane to leave. So I take that as a good sign.
If he said, I don't know what to make of that, then okay. I mean, I think if I were there, I'd be, Ben, let's say you're in her shoes and you're scared and your dad is against the relationship and she lands in your town. What would you do? At the very least, Ben, I'm guessing what you would do is you would text and say, oh my God, I can't wait to see you, because you're in love, right? There's been none of that. It's been radio silence. You have indication that she has seen the texts and has seen you calling and has been ignoring all of it. So in light of all that, he still sees the fantasy. I think we're going to see another David. Remember, I don't think I ever reacted to David. I saw all the scenes. It was in that very first 90 Day Fiancé season that y'all had me watch almost 2 years ago now. And where David would just be sitting in a restaurant or a cafe just like, okay, and he has his laptop and he's just like, I hope she's coming. And everyone watching is like, David, you're being catfished.
Right now, my heart is absolutely beating out of my chest. Muchas gracias.
Ciao, cuídate.
Adios.
Ciao.
I have not built her up to be immortal. I know that she is just a person, but I've been so deprived of love, where you get a taste of it and you feel it and it's real and it's different than what I...
Yeah, good. I mean, some awareness. I don't know what he's concluding from that, but I think what he's saying is when you get a taste of it, you just want it so bad. And so I was willing to travel. I think a further self-awareness layer would be, I'm just so desperate I'll see it when it's fake, like it felt so good to get a taste of love and romance that I was willing to take a leap of faith that most people would not have taken. All right, well, if you want to buy merch, you can click the link below or the banner below and buy shirts and mugs and all sorts of things. And I also have a Cameo. So if you want to do Cameo, it's fun to do that sometimes, but only if you want. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.